Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey, the birthday boy today. Jason, happy birthday.
Well, thank you, man.
And we're recording this on Tuesday. Jason, a lot going on, a lot to talk about with OU football. Been an eventful week. First of all, the news, and we've got to give credit to Dean Blevins from Channel 9 who broke the initial story on Sunday night that Lincoln Riley would be hired as the offensive coordinator. You confirmed it on Monday, and then later that day came the official announcement from OU. Lincoln Riley's a guy that we had brought up throughout the last few weeks since Josh Heupel and Jay Norvell were fired as a possibility, and obviously that came to pass.
Yeah.
Just overall, what are your impressions of the Lincoln Riley hire for the Sooners?
Well, I think it's a good hire. I think that he's a smart guy. He's young, but he's young, and that's one of the things a lot of people are talking about. But he's also very experienced. I mean, he's called plays for 5 years. So it's not like they're just bringing in some 31-year-old who's never done anything. I mean, this is an experienced guy who brings a lot of good with him from his system at East Carolina. So, I think in many ways it's a home run hire. I think this is one of the guys they clearly targeted early on. He's a guy who brings a system with him, which is something Bob Stoops talked about being important. And it's an interesting system. It's one that OU sort of run in the past, but it's Lincoln Riley's own version of Mike Leach's system, which does involve running backs. I think that's something people were a little bit worried about was how would Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon and Keith Ford fit into this? Well, I think they fit into it very clearly. Because when Lincoln Riley's had really good running backs, he's used them.
Yeah, and it seems like his version of the air raid is more based on obviously the tempo that they're going to run. It's going to be a quick tempo. But, they like to spread the ball out and get the running backs involved. I think that's something that sort of scared some OU fans, at least, when they heard Lincoln Riley, air raid, Mike Leach all mentioned in the same group of words. But he certainly likes to get the running game going. He's had a couple 1,000-yard rushers, which I believe Mike Leach has never had as a head coach.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In 13 seasons as a head coach at Texas Tech and Washington State, Mike Leach has never had a guy, at least according to my research, unless I just completely screwed up, which I don't think I did, he's never had a 1,000-yard rusher, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, that's definitely surprising and certainly speaks to his offensive philosophy. But clearly Lincoln Riley learned a ton from Mike Leach, but he hasn't been bound to that. It's his own offense. Bob Stoops said that he wanted to bring in a guy who had his own offensive philosophy to implement that offensive philosophy, and this is certainly going to be an interesting one, especially given what OU has returning at running back and the holes that they've got to fill at the wide receiver spots.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I think right from the get-go, what Bob Stoops said was, we want a guy who's got an offense, and we want to let him run that offense. And so I don't think Bob Stoops is going to interfere. I think he's going to let him do what he thinks is best. And one of the things I think is going to be really interesting is to see who emerges as the quarterback in this offense. Is Trevor Knight still the guy? I think this probably bodes well for Baker Mayfield. But at the same time, Trevor has shown his ability to do things in certain games. Obviously, one game that, OU fans I think are really proud of, but I also think they're sick and tired of hearing about that game. So I won't even say which game it is. You know what game it is. All you listeners know what game I'm talking about.
There's a lot of crimson involved.
So we know that he can do it. We know he can do it. Now the question is, can he do it consistently? And so far that he hasn't been able to. I also think it's interesting to note that, with Lincoln Riley's offense, he gets the quarterback run game involved some, not a ton, maybe not as much as what OU was hoping would be. They would get involved when they implemented the zone read stuff. But so I think there's a place for the quarterback run game in this new offense, but I don't think it's going to be like it was or like they wanted it to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was about to say like they wanted it to be, probably better than like it was, because
It never
Last
really
year,
was.
at least, it never really was for several reasons, but some of which are head scratching and probably led to the change being made.
Yeah, at least some of it. Although we also know that Bob Stoops didn't want Trevor Knight running around too much because he didn't want him to get hurt. Back when Cody Thomas was still injured and Justice was redshirting and Blake had already changed positions. So it's all going to be fascinating to follow. This spring is going to be one of the most interesting springs probably of the Stoops era. Actually, it will be, I think, the most interesting of Stoops era.
Yeah, I think certainly going back to his first one, you would probably say, if nothing else. You mentioned Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's a guy who went to Texas Tech, played under a similar offense. Obviously, like we've talked about the differences, but Baker Mayfield seems to be a guy who fits in with what Lincoln Riley likes to do on offense. And I know we've talked a little bit about Baker Mayfield in the past and maybe, what he was able to accomplish at Tech, which was fantastic, by the way. We're not taking anything away from that, but maybe being a little bit overblown in some OU fans' mind because of who he was doing it against. Now, he was still a true freshman walk-on quarterback, earning the starting job before his first game of his freshman season. So there's a lot to take away from that. But at the same time, he clearly needs to make steps forward from where he was the last time he played quarterback.
Yeah, I think Baker Mayfield's a good player. I hope I've never made it sound like I don't think he's a good player or can't be a good player at OU. My point has always been that I think that this extreme excitement about Baker Mayfield has been a little bit, people maybe need to tap the brakes a little bit because we're talking about a guy who played, against SMU really well. And I don't remember the schedule, so you'd have to remind me of it. But, I feel like, his performances in some of the tougher games he played wasn't quite up to the standard that people are acting like it was. That's my only point. Now, like you said, he was a true freshman and he was a walk-on. So the fact that he did good at all is remarkable and noteworthy. I'm just not sure he's the answer long term. I think that Trevor Knight still has a lot to offer and can still be the guy, maybe with different coaching. I don't want to say better because Josh Heupel's not a bad coach. I just don't think it was working anymore at OU. So I don't want to say better coaching, but with different coaching, maybe he'll be better. And I also think that people are sort of sleeping on Justice Hansen too. I think Justice Hansen could absolutely win this job. So that's my whole point about Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I think looking at Baker Mayfield's game log from his freshman year, started off with an absolutely fantastic game at Southern Methodist, 413 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. At another solid game against Stephen F. Austin, struggled against TCU early last season. Obviously, we know what TCU's defense is traditionally, but had one of his best games against Baylor. As well, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns, just 1 interception, 28-51 late last season. What was it, November 16th of 2013, his next to last game. So Mayfield, he did put up a lot of his numbers against competition that's, isn't quite what he's certainly going to face at OU game in and game out. And in the rigors of the Big 12 schedule. But also, he did play some decent teams and put up some pretty good numbers regardless.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But
those 9 interceptions are certainly something to keep an eye on.
And the interceptions are what's been a problem with Trevor Knight. So, and
interceptions at bad times
that
as much
become
as anything.
Points for the other team.
Right.
One thing I think is going to be interesting now to look at is what receivers coaches might come in because there's been a lot of talk about that, and now you wonder if Lincoln Riley's going to if he's going to be. I imagine he'll be heavily involved in the decision of who to hire, and just looking at who they're going to bring in because they've got to bring somebody in who can develop guys. And we've talked before. probably on this podcast that, I think a lot of Jay Norvell. I know you do too.
Absolutely.
As just on a personal level. And we know that he's a good recruiter. And I'm not even saying that he's a bad developer of talent. Again, it's not a matter of necessarily just him. It's just the fit maybe wasn't working anymore. There's all kinds of reasons that there can be for that, that don't mean Jay Norvell's a bad coach, because he's not. But it'll be interesting to see if they can get somebody in here who can begin to develop some of this talent outside of Sterling Shepard, because there are a lot of guys on this roster at wide receiver that are very talented, that we haven't even seen come close to reaching their potential.
Yeah, I mean, Deron Neal's a guy that I just thought would be fantastic.
I think we all did.
And he hasn't developed nearly what the coaches thought he would, what I thought he would. I thought he would. I loved him. He was my favorite player in that class. But he hasn't worked out, I think, as well as a lot would have liked. And then the young guys that haven't played much, guys like Dallas, well, they haven't played at all.
Yeah.
Guys like Dallas Todd, who came in with really high expectations. Mark Andrews, who's now tight end. And guys like that they've really got to see not only recruit well and bring in more talent, but also continue to cultivate the talent that they have on campus, because, yes, Lincoln Riley's offense is more run-based than most air raid offenses, but you're still going to have to find a group of wide receivers with some depth that can make plays for you. And right now they've got one guy, Sterling Shepard. I don't think his health will be an issue dragging into next year. You've got to think that they'll let him sit as long as it takes right now to get that back 100%. D.D. Westbrook's a guy with a lot tagged on him. Coming in as a junior college guy, but they've got to have some depth there to be able to run this offense and run it well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what you say is right. And you look at an offense like this, you need to have about 5, I would say, or 6 solid receivers that you can count on to make plays. And right now they have 1, so it's just not going to work. And I think back to the days when Mike Leach was the offensive coordinator, and when Mark Mangino, when they won the national championship, that receiver group was unbelievable. And those are guys that weren't even NFL guys.
Yeah.
I think back about that group a lot, about how good that group was with Antoine Savage, Curtis Fagan, Damian Mackey, Josh Norman. These are all guys. None of those guys were NFL guys. Andre Woolfolk was a receiver at that time.
Yeah.
And Mark Clayton was just starting to become what he became. And they don't have anything like that now, and that's incredible, because they've recruited guys who all should be that good at least. But I think with the talent they have on the roster, if they get the right guy in there who can find a way to motivate these guys maybe and develop them to get them close to their potential, there's no reason this receiver group can't be really good.
Definitely. And some other news, Jason, coming out last night. We broke this at newsok.com. You broke it at newsok.com. Bobby Jack Wright deciding to retire. I think this is something that a lot of people around the program had expected to come. I think there had been rumors of it after the last couple seasons at least, but certainly picked up and came to critical mass, ending with yesterday and today on Tuesday the announcement that that was correct. This is a guy who I don't think is going to get the kind of credit that maybe he deserves for helping build the program into what it's become in terms of the way that he was able to go in at Texas and help the Sooners recruit early in Bob Stoops' candidacy, and really his recruiting prowess stretched over a long time. I mean, this is a guy who found and really cultivated Charles Tapper and got him on campus. So just in the last few years, he's continued to have a big impact. But certainly the struggles at his position had sort of magnified things, and he'd been there for a long time and been in coaching for a while, so it just seemed like it was time.
Yeah, and I said this on Twitter last night. Some people, I think, when I reported that he was retiring, one of the questions was, well, is this a retirement or is this a retirement, forced retirement? And I said, if anybody deserves to retire and not, and to go out with a graceful exit like that, it's him. I don't think you can understate what he did for the program. He was a big hire when Bob Stoops got him.
The day after Bob Stoops took the job, he hired Bobby Jack Wright from Texas.
Yeah, he's been incredible for the program. I look at what he, the recruiting that he did, finding Charles Tapper and building that relationship with his family. I mean, it takes. I would imagine it takes a special guy who is, talks. He's got a Southern accent. He's a Texan. I mean, just the way he talks.
Yeah.
To go into inner city Baltimore and build that trust with a family there, and pull Charles Tapper out of there. I mean, to me, that's remarkable. That speaks about his character and his willingness his ability to connect with young people from all different walks of life. And so, to me, he will be missed, I think, in a lot of ways. Maybe it was time for him to step aside, but Bobby Jack Wright should be regarded as one of the biggest elements of this transformation under Bob Stoops of Oklahoma football.
Absolutely, and I've talked to Charles Tapper's mom about Bobby Jack on a couple of occasions, and it's amazing the respect and the love that family has for Bobby Jack Wright. That's come not only through the recruiting process, but the time that he's been in Norman, and not only under Bobby Jack's coaching, even since Bobby Jack has moved to coaching a different position group. That has still continued, and I think that says a lot about Bobby Jack Wright, the person, and Bobby Jack Wright, the coach.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So, but now the focus and attention turns to what's next. Signing day's 3 weeks away. Recruiting dead period ends in just a couple days. Lincoln Riley will be out on the trail recruiting for the Sooners. We could see some more coaches. You've got to think that they'll try to get if not both the wide receivers coach and a coach to replace Bobby Jack Wright in the DB reign, the cornerbacks, you've got to think they'll get at least one of those two in position pretty quick.
I think they're really gonna try to do that. I mean, I would think so. I mean, with recruiting being the way it is, and you trying to finish strong like OU always typically does. They finish really strong in recruiting. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that cornerback spot, because you and I have talked a lot about Chip Viney as a guy who it seems like would be a pretty natural move into the cornerback position. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think that would be a pretty natural move. And if they could get him in there, everybody talks about him as a recruiter on campus. He can't go out and recruit. So if you can make him a full-time assistant and let him go out and recruit, that might really pay dividends. So who knows what's going to happen. Another question I've been asked a lot is about Tim Kish. We've speculated on here a lot, and I've said I think that he was probably one of the guys who was going to be out, and he's still there. I wonder if they're giving him until signing day to find another linebacker or two. And if it doesn't work out, then they might make a change, because we've seen in the past that Bob Stoops will make changes after signing day. And the only linebacker commit that they have right now is a Jerry Montgomery recruit. So, it wouldn't really kill anything or hurt anybody's feelings, I don't think, from the recruiting standpoint if you made that change. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with him. But I think Mike Stoops is sticking around, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I 100% think that Mike Stoops is going to be here next year, but I would certainly put it pretty high on the scale that Mike Stoops will be back. Tim Kish is a guy I think there's a good chance that he doesn't wind up back here next year, but he could save himself with a strong recruiting finish, but we'll see. But Jason, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back on Thursday with a special guest, Josh Graham, who covers East Carolina for Scout.com. He's going to be joining us to talk about new OU offensive coordinator Lincoln Riley. In the interim, You can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.